It's tax day in America. Aviation and rail workers are under attack by the National Mediation Board. Stop and Shop workers are on strike, and more as Labor This Week begins now. Hello, I'm Mark Harrison. As we come on the air, some 31,000 workers across New England are on strike against Stop and Shop, the food chain. The company, which operates 240 grocery stores in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, reported more than $2 billion in profits last year. That's $2 billion in profits, not in revenue. Yet with that, the company, which provided its so-called final offer, said that should the new contract not be accepted, it would be forced to raise prices it charges to consumers. That's a typical ploy to try to get customers on the company's side during a strike. It's the usual fare of bad offers from corporations we have gotten used to, with reduced health benefits, increased healthcare costs to workers, and a raise that the company says is adequate, but in reality fails to cover the cost of increased healthcare premiums. As well, the company is looking to take away certain bonuses like increased pay for working on Sundays, which some workers have become dependent on for making ends meet. Moving on, it's tax day in America. President Donald Trump has actually only passed one significant piece of legislation during his term in office, and that was his 2017 tax cut. That piece of legislation has already saved corporations more than $150 billion, and significantly, it is projected to add a staggering $2 trillion to the country's budget deficit over the next 10 years. But did those tax breaks work for the majority of us? Well, during the second quarter of last year, the economy grew at slightly more than 4%, a direct effect of the tax cut. Yet, prognosticators agree that when the final numbers are in, the rate of growth for the first quarter of this year will be only 1.5%. Now, that's far below the 3% the president has been promising. The tax cut is looking increasingly like what economist Paul Krugman calls a sugar high for the economy. The promise that corporations would bring massive amounts of cash back from overseas never panned out. They mostly just bought back their own stocks, and that has had the effect of bettering the company's price to earnings ratios, which increase the value of the stock and offers a more favorable environment for corporate officers to cash in their stock options. And since we all just paid our fair share of taxes, it is worth remembering that stock options held for a specific amount of time are taxed as capital gains and not as income, which is why many CEOs and corporate executives end up paying less in taxes than do the majority of their company's workers. We're excited to report that the Labor Network and Labor Press have formed a partnership to share resources and help spread the word to all of you about stories that are so very important to our daily lives. If you're watching this show or reading Labor Press, you are the majority. You are out there every day working, and you need this news. The major media and the major cable outlets have all but forgotten to report news like this, news important to all of us. Labor Press is available online at laborpress.org, where you can now find many TLN-produced shows under the Multimedia tab, and on Twitter at LaborPressNY. In Washington, the National Mediation Board has proposed a new rule that could affect rail and aviation workers who are covered under the Railway Labor Act. Of note, most of labor is covered under the National Labor Relations Act, or the NLRA, and is administered by the National Labor Relations Board, or the NLRB. But railroads were placed into a separate category in 1926, known as the Railway Labor Act, and administered by the National Mediation Board, or NMB, to avoid any interruption of interstate commerce. And in 1934, the beginning of the airline industry, aviation workers were lumped in with the railway workers for the same reason. And for whatever reason, workers in the air and rail sectors of today are experiencing better situations for their unions as a whole. But in Trump's Washington of today, that's not acceptable. So the NMB has recently proposed a new rule that will directly interfere with rail and aviation workers' rights to organize a union. The rule would mandate that should a group of workers decide to decertify their union, they would face a mandatory waiting period of 2 years without the option of selecting a new union to immediately represent their collective bargaining rights. a practice that has been used over and over again, some 55 times since 1998, to allow workers to move from one union to another. And here's the kicker. The company would then be free to impose on those workers whatever terms and conditions of employment it so chooses during those 2 years, meaning decades of workplace gains fought for and won could be legally erased at a moment's notice. The system as it now stands has worked for decades, yet because it is a way for workers to improve their lives and in effect to shop for the union that best meets their needs and can provide the best bargaining power for them, the newest Trump appointees at the NMB seem to think the rules need to be changed. And now it's time for our picture of the week with Eric Martin, who is a member of the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 95 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Eric also serves as the Vice President of the Union Alliance Motorcycle Association and is the Treasurer for the Beaver and Lawrence County Labor Councils. Thanks, Eric. I'd love to see a picture of your bike if you get a chance. You can have your photo at work published here at the Labor Network by sending it to us via Facebook Messenger or by emailing it to info@thelabornetwork.com. Finally, a few short takes. Data released last week shows that the U.S. posted the most layoffs during the first quarter of the year in more than a decade. The financial industry saw a whopping 240% higher layoff rate than it did a year ago. And retail job cuts led all of the layoff sectors with more than 46,000 jobs cut during the first quarter. Now, retailers so far have announced plans to close more than 4,000 brick and mortar stores this year, with retailers reporting that economic uncertainty was the main driver behind their decisions to close those stores. So far, at least, the economy has been able to absorb those layoffs. Walmart reports that it is adding thousands of robots to stores to help manage labor costs and to basically clean things up. The firm says it expects to have almost 1,900 of the machines in their stores by next February. Can I call them machines or do I have to call them robots? Whatever. Meanwhile, Giant Food Stores has a tall gray robot named Marty who also cleans things up. Paging Marty, clean up in aisle 4. Or does he just somehow know? I don't know. I've seen him and he actually looks like the picture you're looking at. Finally, it's bonus payout time on Wall Street, where the combined take of more than 180,000 security industry higher-ups was $27.5 billion. That amount is more than 3 times the combined annual earnings of all 640,000 minimum wage workers employed in the entire U.S. To put that in perspective, if you worked a 40-hour week and earned the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, you would earn slightly more than $15,000 a year, while the average Wall Street bonus was more than 10 times that amount at $153,000. And remember, that's just the bonus, not the salary. That's income inequality, and it's not good. That's it for us here at Labor This Week. Be sure to watch for our return of WTF with a Friday this coming Friday, when I'll talk about the egregious strike being endured by workers for Spectrum Charter. That has gone on for more than 2 years now. And remember, all of your favorite shows are now available on Twitter at Labor Network, on Facebook, the Labor Network, and from our website, thelabornetwork.com. And don't forget our increasingly popular podcast versions available at Apple Podcasts and on Stitcher. I'm Mark Harrison.